You're listening to SaskScapes, a podcast featuring the stories of arts, culture, and heritage in Saskatchewan. What's that supposed to be, anyway? Have you ever had a reaction like that to a piece of modern art? I'm Kevin Power, and this podcast is what happens when you get 6 artists together in a recording studio to debate the validity of public art, their art. You may agree with them, you may be offended, but one thing I promise, you'll never look at art the same way again. This is part 1 of a 2-part series to help answer that age-old question, what's that supposed to be anyway? I have with me this morning in the fabulous Paved Arts recording studio, artist and art administrator, Keeley Haftner, Laura St. Pierre, Adrian Stimson, Tammy Krukel, Alejandro Romero, and Jean-Sébastien Gauthier. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining me at 9:30 in the morning on a Saturday. Good morning. Coffee in hand. So I'd like to start first by getting to know you guys a little bit and have our podcast listeners get to know you. So if you wouldn't mind, in any random order, as you feel comfortable, tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from originally, the kind of work you do, the medium you use, and also include in that, talk a little bit about your memories of your first artistic inspiration, your early memories, if you can think of one pivotal moment that kind of created a spark.
Well, sure, I'll start. I'm Keeley Haftner. I'm an emerging artist. Originally from Saskatchewan, born in Meadow Lake, but grew up in Saskatoon, although I did my education in Eastern Canada. I use a really wide range of media, whatever is specific to the project at hand, so pretty interdisciplinary. And I do have a specific, art moment of encounter that really stuck with me. It was when I was 16, the first time I ever traveled. I went to Germany en route to Italy. It was my first time in a contemporary art gallery, and I saw Joseph Kosuth's 4 Colors, 4 Words, and I must have stood in front of it for about 20 minutes. I didn't realize that could be art, and I was just mind blown. So from there on, I was really addicted to contemporary art and pushing the bounds of material investigations and that sort of thing.
And you certainly do that. Thank you. Tammy?
I'm Tammy Krukel. I represent the SkyUp Art Center, which is the Saskatoon Community Youth Arts Programming. I've been with them for 7 years as in many different capacities, but right now, or currently, I am their projects manager, so I oversee a multitude of projects. But we are, to step back a bit, we are the only place in Saskatoon, maybe even the province, that works exclusively with at-risk youth in the arts capacity to bring out their talent, to help them emerge as artists, but also to help them develop as individuals, because a lot of them are sort of stunted in where they are professionally and personally. So we work with them on their life skills and employment readiness to help them emerge not only as artists, but as productive members of our society. My background is education, so I sort of did a bit of substitute teaching and teaching a little bit in Saskatoon. I'm not originally from here, I'm from Alberta. I am sort of an artist. I'm a clothing designer, everything. I like to just do everything hands-on. My inspirations for art just come from everywhere. I am currently thinking of designing purses, but whatever, I just go with the flow, and I really enjoy teaching as and giving out, not giving out, but helping people find their own niche and finding where their passions are. So that's what I really enjoy the most.
Yeah, we've talked a lot already in the first two podcasts about the value of teachers and the impact teachers have on us. It's a great calling. Laura.
I'm Laura St. Pierre. I'm an artist and until recently was a teacher and left teaching at the post-secondary level to pursue my practice full-time. And I work, like Keeley, in a fairly multidisciplinary fashion, although lately I've been doing installations in urban landscapes and photographing them. So the end product is a photograph, but involves a whole process of using urban space. And I do have some history with public art as well, so I'm sure we'll get to that, but I've had some interesting experiences with that too. And that's it.
Can you recall early spark?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. My parents didn't know a lot about art. And so most of my early exposure was, I grew up in Regina, so the Dunlop Gallery in Regina, which is right by the library, right? So every time we'd go to the library, we'd just walk through. And I remember, I think it was either a Poons or a Poons ripoff. So lots of big, heavy, pouring paint, this kind of crazy abstract painting. That's the first art experience that I remember. And then I remember being told not to touch it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jean?
My name is Jean-Sébastien Gauthier. I'm a sculptor, video artist, and performance artist. I make a lot of interdisciplinary work. I guess my key kind of personal interest in my practice is trying to make all of my different types of work mesh into these kind of live performance video sculpture events that usually come off as rather chaotic and experimental. I make public work a little bit. Adrian and I are working on a monument for the city of Saskatoon with Happy Grow as well. And I'm kind of like the Obelix. I fell in the pot when I was a kid with art. My grandpa, Bill Epp, was a sculptor and teacher and foundry man. And so I grew up with this like university professor with a foundry at the kind of peak of his career. When I was about 10, I was just around artists every time. Well, we'd go to farm for the weekend and just had like artists talking to me and showing me what they were doing and asking me questions. So I got used to that kind of interaction really young, and it just kept me engaged. And I think the moment where art became really viable for me was during a symposium in the early 90s. Brad Smith who's an artist and welder. Sometimes you can see him around Saskatoon driving a black truck that says like welder for hire. In the early 90s, he made this piece called Robo Riff, which was a robotic electric guitar controlled like 14-foot tall robot made with like capacitors from cars and stuff. And it was like a guitar with hands that played itself. And at this symposium, he like put on all these leather clothes, and I was like following him around, and he like covered himself in soot and ash from the fire, and was like, okay, let's do this. And I was like, what's he gonna do? And he kind of walked into this room and pulled out an electric guitar and strummed it, and this robot like reached up to the ceiling and popped a hole in a brand new shop that my grandpa had just finished building, and I was like, whoa, that's art. I want to do that. So,
wow.
I like Brad Smith's work is pretty fun.
Wow. Great memory. Adrian.
Good morning, Idamak Skonotani. That's Blackfoot for good morning. For me, I'm a graduate of the Alberta College of Art and Design and the University of Saskatchewan. I did my BFA at ACAD and majored in painting, and then did my MFA at U of S and moved into installation, performance, and sculpture. And so that's sort of my educational background. I call myself an interdisciplinary artist because always trying to find the media that best suits the message, and it also suits my chaotic nature of my own mind.
Right.
I have to focus on many different things. So I've done a number of different things. I still paint quite often, but currently moving into the realm of sculpture, sort of full scale, with Jean-Sébastien and my partner Happy, in doing a public monument. I have done public works before. One at the First Nation University of Canada, sculpture for murdered and missing Aboriginal women. But also at Burning Man, I've done sculptures there, and sort of in that realm where participatory art and challenging art and ethereal art is all part of that. So I've done a few sculptures at Burning Man, so I also have that experience as well. When I take a look at inspirations, I would have to say I was just thinking that it's twofold. I think my sort of first sort of inspiration is the powwow. In essence, the colors, the chaos, the order, the sound, and all that sort of stuff, I think was sort of my fundamental sort of understanding of art in particular. But then as a young man, 17, I went to Europe, and I went to Florence, and I went and saw the David. And for me as a young man, maybe it was my burgeoning homosexuality that made me wanted to take a look at that sculpture all day long. But at the same time, it was a recognition, just being in that studio of Michelangelo's. Michelangelo, yeah. And to see all the other sculptures in process, and then, of course, seeing the David and stuff like that, it blew my mind. And I think it was at that moment that, within myself, that I wanted to perhaps pursue a career in art, although it took many years for me to actually get there. That moment stands out as one of the most inspirational, I think, something that definitely carries on into today, my love of art and space and all that sort of stuff, and certainly the male form.
What a contrast from a powwow to the David.
Yeah.
That's a wide spectrum of inspiration early on.
Yeah.
Right on. Alejandro.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with so many talented people, artists from around. Perhaps I'm not from here, and I'm in Puerto Canada. I came here 14 years ago, and I was born in the Caribbean, in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and I'm still the only male in Canada, in Saskatchewan, from that place. So,
Truly?
yes, and that has affected my work, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And but I want to go back and just start with what inspired me to become an artist. I think my youngest memories of being interested in art was very, very young, as my mother was an actress herself, and she was involved in art, and then she just did a career in journalism. So I grew up knowing and meeting a lot of artists. I have that fortune to be around artists all the time, writers, mostly writers, and journalists. So I was exposed to that at a very young age, and I got a scholarship to go and study in a public school that from grade 7 to grade 12. It was a specialized school in arts, at the time the only one in the island. And I had my 6 years of arts education at a very young age, which was very fortunate. And then after, I went and I did my bachelor in arts. And I always been inspired by my surroundings. I've been a nomad. I have lived in South America and the States and Canada here in 3 different places already. And my art get affected by that, get affected by the location, the materials that I have access at the time, and what is that I want to say at the moment. I have done also performances, even though it hasn't been in the gallery setting. I have my ideas of what galleries are for, and perhaps I like a lot of community work, and I like the social aspect of art, because I also, in my process of growing up, it helped me heal a lot of hurt and pain and emotion. So my art through my art, I've been teaching also newcomers in Canada. I work with inner core neighborhood and also with immigrant communities, and just using art as a tool to express their emotions, their feelings, and where they are, and to not become just an observant, to just have their voice and find their voice, because I think that's very important, and that's what made me become an artist. Just it's a way that you can safely express your voice, and you can call it art. So that's amazing, and also through all that experience, I became an art administrator before I moved here, and then when I came here after practicing art for almost 10 years in Canada, I decided that there was an opportunity, and I decided that why not? So now I have the opportunity to work with a lot of collaboratively with a lot of artists and sort of curate the city canvas.
So you can find a voice by creating something and calling it art, but can everybody call it art? And that is the reason why I've brought you all together. Keeley, this is your doing in many ways.
What have I done?
There's a hot debate happening in this city right now, and I'm quite certain across Canada, about the value of public art, about the funding of public art, probably a bigger question of what is art, and is all art valid? Keeley, your recent project found compressions 1 and 2 installed here in Saskatoon at the corner of 33rd and Avenue C. Tell me what that was about.
So it's a program through the City of Saskatoon that gives artists opportunities to produce temporary works for the city. And so Found Compressions 1 and 2 wasn't originally what I had it titled in my mind, but I had been thinking about this project for a long time. It sort of came out of an evolution of having worked with Loris back when they were called All Green Recycling. I'm very interested in waste management and value-based hierarchies in terms of materials and also socially. So I actually worked at Loris for about 6 months, both as employment, but also to what I considered research. So through that time period, I had been thinking all along about valuation systems in terms of plastics and materials and the kinds of people who were working in the facility and how rigorous the work was and what all those things meant. So I came up with the concept of working with these compressed bales of plastic, which are actually super lovely. They're in the facility, they're stacked cube on cube, and they're just epic scales and forklifts moving them around. And so I was really fascinated by, human hands having sorted through all of these materials, and then they get compressed into these shapes, and then they get shipped away. But of course, there's a value structure within that. So on the recycling line, as things are being sorted, different things are privileged based on how valuable they are. So for example, a milk jug, say, is a number 2 HDPE, so that's really, really valuable, so that's going to be sorted first. But this other plastics that I chose for my project are sort of the catch-all category of 3 through 7, and then films, which are not valuable at all. So I decided to use them as a found object through a series of investigations. I came to the conclusion that that was the best way to present them. And so I had, through a collaboration with Loris, them cellophane wrapped as they would be for transport and stacked one on top of the other. And that's what I proposed and installed for the program. So.
And there's funding for this proposal.
There is funding. It's done. It's actually, there's a really strong misconception nationally that it comes from tax money. It doesn't. It comes from the parking meters of Saskatoon, but that's a whole other story in itself. But yes, it was funded. It was funded indeed.
I had heard several interviews on the radio with you. One, when the installation was up and a local citizen decided that it was in the best interest of all that your piece be covered up with a black tarp. Mm-hmm. And that's when I first heard about your story. And then that controversy seemed to stir in the media day after day after day, right up until the day that the piece was taken down. Mm-hmm. And you were often given a voice in interview. And because of the time restraints of interview, just when you were about to defend your piece, it was time to move on to the next story. And I felt very frustrated for you as an artist and as a person, but I appreciate the time constraints of the radio interview. So this podcast is an opportunity for you all to give voice to your thoughts on art. But I'd like you to keep in mind that there's a listener out there, hopefully more than one, who doesn't get any of this, who doesn't even get the conversation around any of this, does not have a language for it. And at the end of our conversation, I would like to know that somebody walked away rethinking the way they look at art, or at least begin to have a language to express their reaction in terms more than just, deeper than just anger. And so that's my hope for our conversation. I want to read a few of the reactions on a live chat website when you were discussing your piece on the radio. Here's some comments. It is unattractive and maybe out of place, but most of the art in the city looks unattractive. The city should be a little discerning in the selection of art. When art looks like junk, it creates the wrong emotion. Instead of joy or awe, we feel frustration of the waste of effort. This pile of recycled, some are choosing to call art, is weather-worn and leaking garbage back onto the street, which to me seems like dialogue-inducing, less like dialogue-inducing and more like littering. I also question the city's judgment in supporting this particular project. In a city with far more urgent concerns to address like homelessness and hunger, I'm sure the $10,000 could be used more wisely. Certainly betterment of the environment is vital, but we need to be concerned for our citizens. Another comment is, unfortunately, the impression I get from the artist is she stated she didn't originally want her art placed at this location, but plucked it there anyway because, whatever, she gets $10,000. Really harsh reaction. It was never meant to be art. Very disappointing, and someone would have such little regard for the environment. And just because she gave some of the money back to local businesses, we should let her litter our streets. So I think
grabbing this.
Yeah. So there is the anger, raw. And so I guess my question to you and to all of you is it mission accomplished because you solicited that kind of a reaction?
Well, I don't think about it as a mission. I don't think about it as having an end goal and having a very specific point. Like I keep hearing the words point being tossed around. What's the point of this work? I set it up as what I would consider a proposition. And I think of it as an opportunity to discuss not only these specific interests of mine, which have to do with waste and valuation, which are totally interesting when we talk about how everybody has referred to it as trash and garbage, when in actuality it's not. But also because it's a chance to talk about public art in our city, which in that way it has done. Of course, it wasn't a $10,000 piece, and it wasn't simply meant to garner negative response, but I knew it would be provocative. I mean, it would be hard to say that it wasn't. And it was weather-worn, but that's, to me, that works that stagnate, for lack of a better word, words that don't change, are meant to, last forever in a certain time and don't respond to their environment. They're not as interesting to me as the ones that evolve and change with the public or last only sort of a finite amount of time. So I didn't have a point or goal in mind, and it certainly wasn't just to provoke or anger.
Hey, it's Kevin. I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Just a quick reminder that the SaskScapes podcast is available for free on your favorite podcast app, or you can stream it from your browser. Check out the show notes for the link. On the SaskScapes homepage, you'll notice something new under the logo called SaskScapes Plus. You can't miss it. There's a big button saying support with a heart icon next to it. I'd love it if you could click on that button and help keep this podcast series going. When SaskScapes launched in May 2014, it was the first podcast in the province celebrating arts, culture, and heritage. In fact, you'd have been pretty hard-pressed to find any Saskatchewan podcasts. So I'd like to think that we paved the way. It's been because of your support that this podcast is now in its 9th year. Okay, that's it. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
Okay, so then the question begs, must art have an obvious point? Must we look at it? Must I go up to a piece of art and say, that's beautiful, it's a field of daisies, I get it, it's stunning, therefore it is art? Must it be that obvious or a point to be valid? Or does art have a point regardless of how it appears?
To me,
To all of you. To all
I
of
don't
you.
want to commandeer. So.
Well, I think there's something to do with, like, in the whole debate around the public work and what it's supposed to do or not, I kind of bring it back to the types of civic engagement, like artists making something for the public, and also around freedom of expression. Like, we're working with as artists, we're working with different things, trying to find ways of expressing our ideas, and we're doing it in atypical manners. We're choosing different things to say and express something. And if we're going to express a question on the public grounds, it's like a space to test out what kind of freedom of expression is effective or not. And I think that's a responsible action, to test the waters for what art is and what utterance is. Like, if Keeley goes to the trouble to make all this research occur, to write a proposal, to get it into a deadline on time, to have it responded to by a committee of adjudicated individuals, that are chosen to make that selection, and it's accepted by the city, with volunteers and however, and then it's gone through the task of approving that and bringing it and putting that expression into a location, that's valid. It's also, it's going to stimulating the economy. All those people are going to, buy candy and pay GST or whatever.
Right.
But the utterance itself is the kind of task that's being brought up, and artists are bothered to go to the trouble of saying something, and it doesn't have a purpose beyond that. It's communication. It's what do people receive from it? Well, if I say something, anybody can tell me it's rubbish, It doesn't close the debate or change the value of what I've said. It's just who's listening. And public art is putting something in people's space for them to respond to or not.
But some people feel that something has to be beautiful. It has to be enhancing the space.
Well, I think that comes from the classical view of the Western Renaissance and proportions and the beautification of objects, the beautification of society, the beautification of everything. When in fact, it's okay to have wrinkles. It's okay to be saggy. It's okay to be overweight. It's okay to do all those things. That's part of life. In art, it's the same way. There's no difference. But we have some paradigms and some perception on how and what art should look like. And then we just set that as a frame. And that's our frame to look through that lens to see art that way. And what happened here was that the city is growing, it's changing. There's new people, there's new jury, there's an excitement, there's a conversation, there's dialogue. And when a city grows, it comes a lot of different aspects to that growth. And Keeley's piece attained to one of those. Why don't we see? Why don't we look at it? Why don't we just observe and create that conversation? If we are growing as a city, that's part of growing as a city. And with $4,500, what can you do to create that dialogue and that conversation?
Right, but some people feel that they don't want to work that hard emotionally, mentally. They don't want to work that hard to interpret a piece. They want it handed to them quite obviously as beauty. And while it might be interesting to look at a piece and go, oh, the artist really wants to spark controversy here, I have no language around controversial art, for example. I'm playing the voice of the person looking at it saying, well, I don't know how, so big deal, so there's controversy. I can create controversy. I'll go dump my dumpster out on somebody's lawn and call it art, and I don't need $10,000 to do that. And quite frankly, the city could better use that money. So big deal. If you want to create controversy on your own time, with your own dime. And, you know, if the city's funding it, it better be beautiful and it better make sense to me.
Well, I can speak to that.
Yeah.
Well, I think our city's not quite ready, perhaps, for controversy, we'll say. First of all, they think that you got $10,000 for that, which is not true. They don't know that the money comes from the parking meters. They think it's coming from, so maybe, you know, what's it coming from?
Parking.
Oh, no, they said it, no.
2% of parking.
Yeah, right,
meters
that it's coming from
the
their
city.
tax dollars.
So pay parking.
Right.
More art will occur.
That's right. So perhaps we need maybe even just some kind of campaign, like education campaign on where this funding is coming from. You know, there's lots of like in my organization, lots of our funding comes from lottery money. That's not tax money. That's voluntary tax money. So you know,
Scratch and win.
that's right, on gambling. So if that's where our money's coming from, and you know, we shouldn't be paying for that, or we shouldn't be paying for this. So I think we need to start even lower, and we as SkyApps put in. Well, I've worked on 20 public murals in the city since I've worked there, and we've done something like 50 traffic control cabinets that have been painted there on the corners of the streets. I don't know if they're beautiful, but they're there and people notice them. So I think they're valuable. And so I think there's a start. We have to start somewhere. And maybe if they're not ready for recycling on the corner of the street, they should be ready for something. It's time to start putting some stuff out there, because our city, if you go to other cities and other places, we really lack a lot of these pieces that people know, and place markers.
Yes,
right?
but those
we have a ton of
placemakers,
art
we
in
have
the
ton
city.
of art, but the thing is, people forget about those for one
Yes.
piece, and then there's two programs that the city is running, a placemaker program, which are all temporary pieces, and those are the ones that measure what the city is moving forward, what is the population looking for, what is happening, what are the conversations that are happening at the moment, while the permanent work is more traditional, more classic, because it's more permanent. It talks about the society in a different other context, so people are unaware of it.
I just want to jump in and say, it's also, people who, as an artist, I understand that there can be different functions for art, right? So one kind of art isn't maybe my bag, another kind of art isn't someone else's bag. And there are a lot of, so Keeley obviously is interested in work that provokes discussion, dialogue, and thought. Other people are interested in making things that are just beautiful. And there are a lot of artists out there interested in that kind of work. And SkyApp is interested in engaging the community in a different way with murals and that kind of stuff, as engagement for the people making the murals, but also speaking to the city and specifically where those murals are located, the people in that location, right? So there's a whole bunch of different purposes to art, and there isn't an art, capital A. I would say there's more arts. And so, what interested me about the response to Keeley's piece was well, art has to beautify the city. Well, maybe some art does, and that's great, and other art provokes a discussion, and that's great. And I think we are getting to the size. Saskatoon is growing, and we have such a multicultural community now that we can acknowledge that there are different purposes. And so, as Jean-Sébastien says, like one person making an utterance might not be your bag, but there's probably an utterance down the street that's more your thing.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the city
Yeah.
itself has a tremendous amount of public work. And I come from a family that was involved in teaching people to make sculpture. So my grandpa had this effect on the city in that he made dozens of monuments in the city. Some people may be tired of some of them or not, but dozens of permanent installation pieces have been prepared. some according to his artistic interests, and some according to clients' artistic interests, and some, who knows. And all the different artists that he was working with have presented other works. A lot, there's this plethora of public works in the city. It's for a city the size of Saskatoon. Even in the 90s, the amount of public art coming out was tremendous from a very small community of artists. And my grandpa's view is and I think it fits with the placemakers. It's kind of like a taste making. You become literate of art by looking at art. We present as much art as we can, and every person's going to utter something differently. You don't get a taste for found art work if you have no experience with the history of found objects and how Duchamp and these other artists have used found objects. Although found objects are found in other abstract expression sculptures in the city. They're just welded together into another shape, brass pieces by Les Potter and Doug Bentham. But there's all these different works, and there's no lack of controversy that's occurred in the city around public work. In 1989, the Jeux Canada Games commissioned a sculpture to place at the riverbank in Spadina, and it was 2 granite pieces made by Brian Lane and Doug, sorry, I'm forgetting my names, but the 2 artists prepared this work, and it was placed just before the opening ceremonies, and the public was outraged. What is it? It's abstract. It's 2 granite pieces with a bronze kind of lightning kind of abstract form between the 2. It's not. It got removed, placed upriver in Lawson Heights. It's there still. And my grandfather was commissioned to make another piece. So outrage generated 2 works. One was, and it was placed, the piece is The Spirit of Youth, and it was placed at the base of the river, and it's like a small ball of people that's shined up by all the kids, playing on it and things. So Saskatoon gets upset about something and takes things away, and other people put things back.
And I'm not so sure that it's endemic to Saskatoon. I mean, I want to give the city a break. And I've been living in Toronto for the last 25 years, and the new addition to the ROM sparked huge controversy. Some people just find it absolutely disgusting. I find it fascinating. So I think this conversation has been going on since the dawn of man, and I don't think that it will resolve itself anytime soon.
Well, it's art appreciation. When you take a look at North America in general, there's a real strong conservatism that exists in Western society here that doesn't teach art appreciation from a very early age. I could probably have a better conversation with a 5-year-old in Europe about art than with an adult here in North America. And maybe that sounds a bit snobby, but it's the truth. And we're definitely moving into a better place in terms of understanding art and what it is. And in terms of the eye of the beholder and all that sort of stuff, but it's really all about provoking one to think more. And generally, I find in North America we really don't want to think that much, And for the majority, they all want to be told how to think. And one of the things I think that hasn't been talked about this particular piece is that the person who covered it up with a black tarp. In Saskatoon, we have laws in particular that speak to damaging public property or marking up. There's a huge graffiti thing in this thing, whether they go after all the graffiti artists for tagging and stuff like that. That's tagging. There's no difference between the 2. So why does this privileged person, probably middle class male, get to go and cover up this piece of work, call the media, get all this attention, and in fact it's self-serving because I understand he wants to be go into the political realm. So therefore, he has a free platform to get up there and talk about his whole thing. What if this was a young person who did that themselves? I'm sure the law would be right after them to charge them for doing this in public property. Do what the rest of us do. Write a letter.
Some may argue that some of the pieces...
Talk about it at Tim Hortons.
Exactly.
Get really upset.
He can have asked Keeley for coffee. She would go to the blog.
So I think that's one aspect that hasn't been talked about in this is that the privilege that exists within that person doing that to that particular piece of art, regardless of what their personal ideas of it is. So I think that's one aspect that needs to be discussed.
Okay, so
Down the road.
quelling the flames a little bit, let's go back to art education then. Do you feel any of you feel a responsibility through your work? Are you insulted by the fact that you have to kind of put your voice forward to do your part in educating people around your work? Does that insult your artistic sensibility, or should people do that on their own time and let you get on with creating your next piece?
Well, I think it's an exchange. Mm-hmm. It's an exchange. I think it's a responsibility as a professional. Just be like Keeley has been very professional in her ways to explain and be front when there's interviews and things like that. She didn't back up of her project. On the contrary, she's willing to talk about it. I think that's a very professional attitude towards teaching people what it means, why you created that. And I think there's a responsibility for an artist when they put art in public space to be behind their work.
Right. Well, there's a perception even in my world of theater and music. I mean, when I think of the symphony, there's a lot of people that don't go to the symphony because they feel it's sort of an us and them kind of thing, that there's a real class separation, that it's for the elitist, that it's a black tie affair, and that somehow you must sit and listen to something that might not be Mozart and feel moved by it, and if you don't, then the problem is yours. Some people feel alienated. Some people feel like it's an elitist group that you all belong to, and that part of your mystique, part of the mystique of the artist is that they somehow remain removed from the public.
It's sometimes you could, like, being a francophone in a minority situation is similar. It's like, oh, they're speaking French. What are you saying about me? Like some kind of, like there's some artist who's trying to pull one over on you. You know, and you don't know what they're talking about. It's like, you don't need to, do you speak French? No. We're just speaking French. It's like, there's art being made. It's art. Like, if you're curious about it, stay curious. If you don't like it, you don't like it. If you want to get mad about it, you're allowed to get mad about anything. Like, I get mad about roads in this city, and I'm like, I tripped on something the other day. I could have fallen down. I didn't. You know, but like I could be mad about something. I could be mad about anything, and I can, get upset with things. That's my privilege too. You know, like people get mad at art because they like to scapegoat this kind of thing they don't have to understand. And
but there are better ways. I mean, I think what Keeley's piece, the controversy around Keeley's piece highlighted for me is there are better ways for all of us, I mean, the city included, to engage with the public, to include the public, right? So in Montreal, for example, along Mount Royal, by the Mount Royal metro station, there was always a competition every summer, and people could propose temporary pieces, and the public would vote on them. Not all public art has to be made that way, but if I think about someone going through and looking through 10 or 12 proposals, like, just Joe on their computer, whatever, doesn't know a lot about art, for me, that's fantastic. That's a great way to engage someone in the process of selection of public art, right? So this is how, that's what this is about. And when the pieces were installed, people already understood what, or had an entry point into the work, right? And I think part of the problem with, if I'm not sure if Keeley would agree with this, but for me, it's like plunking something, and you had, signage and things where people could get involved, but maybe there needed to be something more. Maybe there's other ways that the city can involve people in the debate around it, maybe before it happens, or as it's happening.
I love it, and I need to jump because, I work for the city. That's my other hat, and I was part of all this process, and we did all that. We did the community engagement before we did the call for the placemaker program.
Right.
And there was a lot of places that we went with our boards of the old work that was in the city, and then we get a touch of what people wanted. They wanted changes. They wanted, if you look back 20 years of the program, right. 19 of them, they were only downtown.
Okay.
Only downtown or Riversdale or Broadway or downtown. This is the first year, which is a change. So, of course, there's expectations on people of what is going to happen. This is the first time that the program got moved by the petition of that same neighborhood that the art was put on. Then on 33rd. They wanted it on 33rd. This year they got 3. Last year they got 3 pieces of art, and they focused on one that they dislike. for no reasons, and or their own personal reasons.
They can just
But context is also important.
Yes,
and
I
I know
know
that Keeley proposed this piece for a different location, and to me that piece would read totally differently on River Landing than it did on 33rd.
Yeah.
Because of the struggles that, the way that people interpret their space or have been trying to manage the space on 33rd, right? It's like a neighborhood that people are trying to, quote, clean up or change the appearance of. It's becoming more gentrified, and some people are very happy about that, right? And so then you put garbage. That's a very different, the context is really important. And I don't know, I don't really know if the committee that selected the work or the city ever took any responsibility for that and saying like, okay, Keeley proposed it for this kind of beatific riverside spot, and it got plunked on a neighborhood that's struggling to clean itself up. Yeah. So that's
but then you put it in another neighborhood, and that's going to be the same conversation because
would it look the same on Spadina by the pier?
I
mean, it'd be interpreted very differently, right? Context is everything with public art. You can't ignore that. But what happens is, the city has the structure. Okay, we want to put one sculpture here, one sculpture here, one sculpture here. That's great. And I'm really happy to hear that was from public feedback. But at the same time, you have to think about what the piece is and where it's going and what that means for that neighborhood, right? And also that the artist doesn't always have total control over those factors, right? So I don't think people understand
work
that.
out in the open,
Yes.
It's wilderness. It's like you don't know if other pieces were wrapped as part of the project, like as part of the placemaker project. Other people's work was wrapped in white plastic.
Yeah.
Then a piece was wrapped in black plastic. And put a note, and it was like, okay, great, that person's got this opposite point, but, if the city's job is to get garbage off the street, and that's that other person's point, then great, you just found out that they're not doing their job right, especially not during the winter, because when the snow melts, there it is. I live on 27th, 5 blocks from where the sculpture is, and that's apparently the most profitable Safeway in Canada. Next to it. So, there's a lot of people who go there for the neighborhood. It's the only grocery store, so it's nearby. It's seen, but there's just as much garbage all around.
Yes, but again, if any of you have been on juries, there's many layers when the juries are deliberating. The city doesn't select the piece; it's a jury in behalf of the city, and the jury represents the citizens.
Does it truly?
In some ways they do, but again, when the nominations for the jury comes, how many people submit their names? It's a voluntary position. How many people are in fact interested in being a voluntary position, committed for a year to just selected pieces of art and not get paid? So I think it's broader than what we see. Public art is not just putting something and plop it in one place and that's it. It's many layers. What is the budget available? What are the vision of these people that represents the city? Where do they live? What is the composition of that jury that the city doesn't select? It's city council.
Right.
But this is from a pool of volunteers. How many artists are submitting their names to be part of those jury? How many of them are willing to give up their career? Because if they put their name and they are part of that jury, they cannot put their work. How many opportunities are for those artists in the public realm to be part of that jury or not be?
Are there criteria that have to be met to be part of that jury?
Pardon?
Is there a certain set of criteria that have to be met to be part of that jury?
Yes, there's for practicing artists, and then again, there's a new policy. We are in transition because we saw that there were some opportunities for improvement, and that's why the council approved a new policy that is in place. But again, there's layers of this, and I think there needs to be an understanding of what is the concept of what is public art.
Should we then open up the jury selection to
non-artists?
Should I'm asking? I'm not.
Never get a say.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. If we're having a true public forum about where the city goes as far as public art goes, then perhaps rather than possible political advancement of said person who covers Keeley's piece up with black tarp, perhaps his energies are better served to get his name in to apply to be on a jury as
You
Joe
can
citizen.
absolutely do it.
Well, also, like,
Maybe
Every
people don't know that they can do that.
Dates posted in the newspaper.
Well, they don't know. Just like your community consultations,
what day garbage
I
day
don't
is.
know how many people go to those things because I know that I've gone as as SkyApp representative, but it's not everybody and it's not the average public. So it's still that education thing that people aren't engaging in
Right.
the talks at all. So then when pieces get put out, they have no idea. They have no idea why they're there. Why? Like, what's the point, right? Because they didn't even know anything about the beginning part, the consultations, how the whole.
What I will
But-
say though is that it wasn't contextless and it wasn't unprepared in terms of presenting it to the community. There was a lot of media attention leading up to installing the work. It was actually front page of the Star Phoenix, and they talked to me about what I was doing. And it literally, if you look at that title, just the title alone, if you glanced on it, said "Artist hopes to provoke discussion using bales of plastic," and that was done before the piece was even installed. Then what happened afterward was a public discussion held in Mayfair Library, where each of myself and another young artist who did a mural down the street, which is sort of in the more typically aesthetically pleasing category, which everybody, sort of categorically embraced and loved on 33rd. He and I both talked about our work in this discussion, right? So, which was great, and we had a chance to contextualize it. Not many people showed up, but I mean, we were there. It was advertised very well, and I talked about the entire art historical, conceptual, and site-specific reasons, the rationale behind the project, and it was just installed that day. So there was an opportunity for that, and then. Of course, it's gone through the winter process and then re-emerged as waste does, and I think that really adds to what the piece did. Like, that's an unpredictable factor that was excellent to me. So I think that all was in place.
Right, but what if somebody says, "Oh, sure, have the conversation after you got the funding"? I mean, isn't that a little bit late now? I mean, you're going to go ahead no matter what we say. I mean, should that conversation happen as part of the decision-making process? And then should we go even further? Should we say, fine, your piece is approved in theory, but the next stage is we need to approve where your piece will go?
Well, I mean, that's all administrative, right?
I always have this feeling when it comes to that whole argument of tax money and all this money sort of going towards public art. I think Canada Council or somebody did a research a few years back, and it was proven that it was like 3 or 5 cents comes out of your pocket for public art in this country. It's like absolutely nothing. So often when I have somebody say, "Well, I take the money out of my pocket and I give it to them," and I say, "Here, here's your money back if you feel so upset." So really, the one bottom line is very little money is spent on public art in this country in the first place. And so I often find that whole conversation be, it's like, oh, come on.
Well, that's in it, but that's
how much money goes to
both
subsidizing
industry.
oil companies? How much money goes to
exactly.
subsidizing all these other things that are destroying the planet?
Yeah.
Art provokes discussion. Art provokes
That's why they don't like it.
creativity. Art, exactly. It's about freedom and I think of expression. And I think most people don't like people to be free.
I mean, there's public spending on so many things. You can just take a price tag and try to debate it. Like, how many people? Like, we talked about this last week, Alejandro. The public hockey arenas.
Yeah.
I never use those.
Yeah.
I don't even have all the gear I need to play hockey at a public arena that's funded. But people are spending money on that. And as somebody who pays taxes, do I really need a say in that? Well, I have a say in that. I can vote in my local elections. I can go talk to people. I can address those issues. And if it's really a problem for me that $4,000 gets spent on one thing and not the other, then go to town.
Sure,
get
but
involved.
you know that sports and recreation on an amateur level and a professional level generates much more money
does art.
than
art
argue.
generates
So
a
does art,
tremendous
yeah.
amount of money.
Yes.
I mean, how many people, Anna Maria Tremonti she's getting paid for talking about that sculpture when it's on The Current. All the staff that are involved in generating stuff at the Star Phoenix get paid to generate stuff. All the people who pay money for their newspaper to get some new information pay for it. All the internet providers who have information in the communications networks, they're charging, bucks for people to talk about stuff. Like, we're making up reasons to do things all the time.
Yes, but do you think that honestly a 1-minute spot in the middle of Hockey Night in Canada costs as much as a 1-minute spot in the middle of the Kennedy Center Presents
special? A 1-minute
special?
spot on, Saskatchewan NewsHour doesn't cost, for 2 nights in a row cost you $4,000,
But since when is everything about money
it's
anyway?
not about right.
I mean, honestly, there's a lot of things in my life that I don't pay for that are super fantastic. So, I think that argument is flawed. If we boil everything down to dollars and cents, that argument is flawed.
Well, so then going back to what you said, Adrian, so if you don't like it, here's your refund. John Sebastian, you likened it to a taste testing. So I go to a restaurant, I order something off the menu. It's absolutely disgusting. I send it back to the chef, and I say, the chef comes out and says, here's a voucher for a free meal next time. We're really, really sorry.
Well,
so should we be doing the same thing?
Well, you can. You walk up 33rd, you see a sculpture, you're like, I don't like that sculpture. You walk another block and a half, you're at another sculpture. Mm-hmm. And people don't think, well, that was stupid. But I get to take a look at something else. You can look at anything. You can look around. You can figure it out.
You know what I don't understand? The city is polluted with a lot of media advertisement that is ugly and unappealing. Yeah. But because the media is private, it's okay to put it in the public realm. So what is the difference?
Well, if I go and cover up an ad and black out somebody's advertising, I'm going to have some difficulties.
Just to add to this, there's another piece of art that's up right now that's causing controversy, and it's Dana Claxton's piece, Billboards, Tonto, Pray For Me. Yeah. And it's Tonto and stuff like that. And actually it was an Indigenous person who called in and complained saying it was racist and stuff like that. Dana Claxton's an Indigenous artist, and there's a reason why she did that. Again, to provoke that discussion around historical names, historical stereotypes, racism, all those different things. And that's why those are there. Yeah. So those, so again, that's another piece that has controversy. And I think that's good, because what it does is this opens up that space where even as an Indigenous person, when I go and look at that, say, yeah, that's racist, and then I call it racist in the public realm, then I have to back up and say, oh, hang on a second, an Indigenous person actually made that. Right. Why did they make that? Oh, because of the stereotype. So here is a great learning opportunity I think that artists constantly provide. We do amazing amounts of research that goes into our works, and our works are then in the public realm, and that begins that conversation and opens up a whole different way of educating, rather than the Western system of going to school and stuff like that. This is actually more free, where people actually get to have their reaction, and then if they're interested, go away and start finding out and filling in all the blanks.
Right, so then how do you lead Joe Average from that visceral response of anger to then going on further to do the background research to find out really what the piece is about, and find out that actually they're severely misinformed in their visceral reaction? How do you get to that?
Well, it's like
control people.
It's like the story of taking the horse to the river to drink water. You can take it, but you can take him, but you cannot force him to drink water. It's the same. People make choices all the time, and if you choose to not like a piece of art, just walk the other road.
I think
there's other beautiful ones.
I think you can make it easy for people to find information, though. I mean,
there's a panel. You put a panel.
You put a panel. You put an explanation. You Google Tonto Pray For Me Saskatoon.
But all this information is accessible in the website. And what I find interesting is that the same person that did all this, he called me and found me right away, one call. He didn't even mention anything about the work. So then he said that he called these other counselors and all that, when in fact, how much of that is true? So then media also like to turn around and spin the information because it appeals to sell. So then, in fact, I got calls too of liking the piece of Keeley's. But do those people get covered?
Right.
No.
No, because it's good. It doesn't create controversy. So what I think, what creates a controversy here, where an individual that have other interests, personal interests, and he called the media, and the media said, okay, let's go the story. They never called the counselors that they say that he called. There was more to the story. They never talk about the layers of that work where it was installed in front of the place that produced the garbage or the containers or the materials and talk about the process. And then the banks that fund that, there was a lot of other conversation that could have happened about that. Is gentrification okay? Is gentrification not okay? So there's many, many layers of that work. And I think it was when the jury made the decision to put it there, and when we as administrator found that place was going to be there, we commented that it could create some controversy. Are we up for this? We were ready for it. We knew that it would happen. But then, do we choose no because it's conservative and take a conservative approach, or we said, let's support the artists? That's part of our mandate. Support the artists as we have supported every other artist that have been in the program. So it's a very difficult situation for administration and the public. I got 3 calls of not liking their work, but I got 6 that they like it,
Do you feel that the media plays a responsibility?
Absolutely.
They do.
And I grew up, my mother is a journalist. I grew up in an editorial environment where it's not the story. It's not the story that is good that sells. It's the story that creates controversy, and they don't care if they destroy an image of a person as long as they sell the newspaper, as long as they sell the story. So then, my respect for that type of situation is very low because I grew up seeing it, and it happened. There wasn't an opportunity here, really, give the same amount of time that they give to this gentleman, to give it to Keeley, to give it to other people, and just go in the community and interview other artists.
But sensational themselves. I mean, headlines hit the front page.
But he called the media. It wasn't the media found it.
Right.
He wrapped it. It was planned, and it was planned just the Sunday of Easter, where Monday is a holiday. And then it's just all planned. I think time, and I can show you my notes here. April 7, we have already conversations. Keeley was in Iceland in a residency, so we just let her just enjoy her residence instead of moving there. This gentleman, the 19th, decided to tarp it. So then,
public money. No.
That's right.
So it's interesting how all this happened, and it was never an opportunity to just tell these stories.
Thanks for listening. The SaskScapes podcast is created by Kevin Power as part of the Culture Days Animateur program operated by Sask Culture. Funding to the cultural sector is provided through the Saskatchewan Lotteries Trust Fund for Sports, Culture and Recreation. If you want to hear more of these podcasts or to see the great work being done by other Sask Culture animateurs, please visit www.iheartculture.ca. Special thanks to Paved Arts in Saskatoon for their technical support. Music for SaskScapes is provided by Saskatchewan-born singer-songwriter Jeffrey Straker. There is no end to the stories to be told. So, until next time,